All right, so we're gonna go over a few sensors here on the V6 3.0 liter 4 cam 24 valve Toyota engine. This engine, I think I don't remember when it came out, maybe 1994 all the way up to maybe present.
The 2000s.
Yeah, somewhere in that time frame. So this specific engine is the 1MZ-FE. And we're just kind of going over, we're getting the check engine light a lot, and the check engine light has been always coming up as bank 2 sensor 1. And it seems to be a controversy. There's not too many videos out there about where the sensors are and what the oxygen sensors are, and the difference between an oxygen sensor and a sensor to read
air to fuel
ratio mixture, etc.
It's California stuff.
Right, most of that's California stuff. Now this is a non-California model. This happens to be a 1994 Camry, I think, with the first V6 in it, an LXE, which seems to have all the bells and whistles.
The XLE, I think, the extra luxury edition.
You know, whatever. And so we're going to kind of go over some of the sensors and where they're located and whatnot. Now, I take a guess and say that this is probably a cam positioning sensor, and there's probably one on the other cylinder, on the other side of the valve cover, probably on that side opposite end. I'm just guessing. This is probably your TPS, your throttle positioning sensor. Looks right to me. EGR, vacuum for your EGR, vacuum module, whatever they call that, and then temp sensor. Temp sensor is right here on this side. It's 2 wires, 2-prong sensor, and then these 2 wires feed back to the ECM, to the computer, to tell the engine what's going on, whether it's hot or cold, and it helps control your air-fuel ratio, how much fuel to dump. This sensor right here, which is a 1-wire sensor, is straight to your gauge. That's your gauge, or your dummy light indicator. That's what this sensor is. This just operates the gauge. So this could be bad, sending a faulty signal to your PCM, which we've already encountered. I wouldn't recommend buying one of these from your local auto parts store. I'd recommend buying a Toyota or Denso brand. Now, I bought a Toyota, a genuine Toyota brand sensor. This sensor, the same. I would recommend that. This diagnostics port is pretty much obsolete on this car because it has another OBD II port underneath the dashboard, which this is the controversial year where they say they don't have an OBD II, but they do, because they were just converting at that point. So they stuck that up there in the wiring harness. When I try to OB1 it out by trying to read the check engine light flashes or the overdrive flash lighting, it doesn't work on this vehicle because those ports are not operational for this vehicle. It actually reads off the OB2. Unfortunately, OB2 starts at 95 and up. This is a 94, which is sad because I got to get the guys and teach them how to put in a 95 or 96 with this particular engine to get the right code. So if anybody has a 94, you probably have been through these problems where you're on the cusp of, you know, all of those issues. But anyway, this is probably your fuel pressure regulators. Looks like we might have 2 of them here. Underneath here, on each, below the intake, once you pull this intake off, this plenum, when you pull this intake plenum off, that is your NOx sensors. You have 2 of them, 1 for each cylinder. So if you're worried about a NOx sensor, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. It's underneath all of this stuff. You have 2 of those guys, and remember, bank 2 sensor 1 is in the front.
For an oxygen sensor, yeah.
For your oxygen sensor, and that's before the catalytic converter, behind the manifold. Bank
1 is in the back, I think.
Is it bank 2 sensor 2?
It's bank 2 sensor 1 that we're having a problem with. That's
Right.
this one right here.
Luckily, it's the easy one to get to. Bank, what would that one be back there? Bank 2, sensor 2?
That would be bank 1 sensor 1, right back
Okay,
here.
bank 1, sensor 1. That's before the catalytic converter.
Right by the firewall.
Right, that helps adjust the fuel-air ratio
For both.
and
yeah.
right and performance. So we're having a problem up here on this particular set of cylinders on this V6 with this sensor. So we're going to spray some WD on it, take it off, and change it. Now we have a Denso part here. Now I understand some of the Lexuses and newer model V6s, the same V6 but newer models use a different sensor number. But this sensor is Toyota's number for this particular 94. It is for bank 1 and bank 2, or
But for upstream only.
upstream only. Upstream means before the catalytic converter. Now there's a sensor behind the catalytic converter, that's your oxygen sensor. It'll probably have a longer wire than this. A similar plug, but a longer wire. And we're going to change this sensor, right, like I said, in a few minutes. And a good idea would be, I think, not to get any lubricant on the element here. So we're going to try to avoid that when we put the new one in. Now we'll spray the old one to get it off with some WD or some PB blaster. We just don't have any PB. We'll see if we can get some of this to penetrate. And we don't have one of those special sockets, so we're going to use a tubing wrench. 7/8. It's really metric size, but we're going to use a 7/8. What size was this in
It was
metric?
a 22.
22 millimeter?
22 millimeter tubing wrench. We didn't have a 22.
Okay. Well, we'll use 7/8 if we can get it. If it starts to strip out, we'll stop. We'll lay off. But yeah, these don't have to be horribly tight in the manifold. So we'll do that. And if this does not solve the problem, then obviously we have a cat issue or something like that. I have a sneaky suspicion that this sensor went bad. The check engine through for the temperature control, the sending unit, temperature sending unit, and it's kind of a belief to me that maybe the sensor was going bad, but not quite bad enough to throw a check engine light. And when it did, by the time it did throw a check engine light, it was constantly dumping fuel. Because I noticed bad gas mileage and hesitation in some instances. So I'm suspecting that this sensor was going bad, causing the engine to dump more fuel, and this oxygen sensor right here was getting flooded. So occasionally it would throw a check engine for the oxygen sensor, and then finally, after running this car long enough, it threw a check engine for the temperature sending unit. I'm suspecting that the temperature sending unit went bad, thus for flooding the oxygen sensor in bank 2 sensor 1. I'm hoping that's what went wrong. And sometimes, you know, these computers aren't flawless. Sometimes one sensor will be on the verge of going out and not completely go out and send faulty signals, faulty values to the computer, and not quite faulty enough within a range not to throw a code yet, but in reality they're actually bad, telling the engine to dump too much fuel, or not enough for that matter. So if you have problems with cold starts in the morning, or it takes, you know, I don't know, it gives you a hard time starting, or it lacks power when you first start it up, take a look at your temperature sending unit, because that's usually the culprit on most vehicles, not just foreign, foreign, but domestic as well. So you just follow your lead, like I said, all the way up, and it looks like it's strapped to the transmission fluid dipstick, and then it comes up to about right here, and here is your plug. And of course, in all sensors you want to check your wiring, make sure your wiring is appropriate. See, like this plug has a little bit of oil in it. We'll clean the female out with some carburetor cleaner and let it air dry, and then we'll take the sensor out if we can, and we'll have to unstrap it from right here. So It looks like it's strapped with a plastic clip onto the dipstick tube. Looks like we'll have to zip tie it back. Okay, fine. Okay, so we got the old oxygen sensor out. That was pretty easy. All I did was stick the 7/8 on there. You can tell that it didn't fit super tight, but close enough because it's a 6-point. I wouldn't try this with a 12-point anything, not in standard size, in a standard size wrench or a standard size socket. But anyway, we got it on there, and what we did was we tapped it with a hammer by holding pressure down and tapped it forward to loosen it. And once we tapped it a few times, it acted like an impact, and it broke that rust, that carbon buildup seal. And that seems to work pretty good. I understand some of y'all can't do that with that little ratchet set or whatever that comes with changing oxygen sensors that you get, but the way that we're doing it, it worked. So what I'm going to do is compare numbers and see with the new one versus the old one. You can see there's some slight variation, there's some slight difference, not much at all actually. There's a Denso part number here, which is what came on the box, and this one is a genuine Toyota oxygen sensor, so it's been in there a while, and it's got a part number on it. I'd have to go inside and cross all these numbers, but before we ordered this sensor, we crossed Toyota numbers already, so I trust what we cross-referenced.
The sensor indicates up or down. Bank indicates one side or the other.
Right.
That's the general rule.
Okay, so that kind of clears that up when you go to the auto parts store and you ask them, hey, where is the sensor located? And they give you this description, and you just wind up changing the wrong sensor. Because I think I paid $60 for this sensor, maybe more, maybe 70 or 80, because it's Denso brand. It's Toyota's recommended brand. So we'll cross this sensor later. We're going to change this one out. I can't return this sensor, so we're going to change it out anyway. So I think Denso gives you some copper colored. I'm going to assume that this is never seized without reading anything. And be careful not to get it on your sensor. Oxygen sensor, that's the new one. All we had to do was tighten it up to crush that crush sleeve a little bit there, that washer. And next thing we're going to do is clear the codes. We're going to clear the codes without disconnecting the battery. Of course, Toyota, you can disconnect the battery and clear the codes. Most Toyotas. What we're going to do is we're going to do it without killing our radio presets and all that and our clock. We're going to find the EFI 15 amp. Which one would that be? This one?
That one.
Yeah. Gotcha. So we're going to pull the EFI fuse out.
Leave it out for a bit, I think.
15 seconds, they say, roughly. I've been about close to that. And what is that, the secondary?
That's ECU B.
ECU B?
Yeah,
okay.
Probably for the...
Let's clear that too. That's about 15 seconds, roughly. Okay. Let's pull ECU B out just for the hell of it. Okay. ECU B.
Have the computer relearn.
Yeah, well, the computer's going to go back in learning mode. It's going to actually force it to relearn right now. It's going to go back to factory reset.
Timing, all that, for any kind of fuel.
Okay.
It's a good tip for if you're going between premium and low octane fuel.
Well, I know if you disconnect this, I mean, if you reset your computer and your car runs like excellent for a little while, you get real good gas mileage and horsepower for, you know, depending on a certain amount of time. You definitely got a sensor issue somewhere. Okay. Alright, check engine light works. Start the car. Took a while to start. but it's been doing that now for some time. Okay, it's idling up. That indicates to me that the temperature sending unit is doing its job. It thinks it's cold outside. The engine's cold, so it's idling up, and it should drop back down to 900 or so after it warms up. Now, we're not going to wait the whole video for that, but our check engine light is officially off. Now we'll check back in a couple of days and see if it stays off or it pulls up the same code. Another thing I wanted to note is the car had a bit of a couple of rotations before it started up. That indicates to me that there's a fuel leak down problem. Now, it could be a clogged fuel filter, but that usually kills you on top end. In other words, while you're running down the highway or something and you're trying to get throttle response because it's starving for fuel. Now, when it's hard to start like that in the morning or at any time when it's cold and you have to turn over a couple of revolutions, that's telling me that something's not holding fuel pressure. That starts at the fuel pump. The fuel pump has the electric fuel pump has a check valve in it that sometimes is stuck or faulty, and it lets fuel leak back down into the tank out of the system. So it's not primed. It's not, the fuel system is not staying primed. So that's a dead indicator that the fuel system is not staying primed. Now, I looked under the hood of this car, and it looks like somebody changed the fuel pressure regulator. At least one of them, if there is two on this car. Now, I would assume that would be my first assumption, is a fuel pressure regulator. My second assumption would be the fuel pump. Fuel pump check valve is letting the fuel bleed back into the tank out of the line. It's not holding its pressure. And then, of course, the worst case scenario would be the fuel injectors are leaking down. I'm not getting a rich start from the tailpipe. I've already inspected that, so I'm going to rule out the fuel, I'm going to rule out the injectors bleeding down. In other words, being stuck in sort of an open position when you kill the vehicle. I'm going to rule that out, and I'm going to assume that it is the fuel pump check valve. So I'm going to order a fuel pump if I can get my hands on a Denso. If not, I'll get my hands on a Bosch and I'll change the fuel pump. Luckily for us, the fuel pump is easy to change in this car because there's a plate underneath the back seat of this car that gives you direct access to the top of the fuel tank. So we'll be able to change that fuel pump right there. We're having no problems with the fuel gauge. It's reading accurate. So we're not going to change the fuel sending unit or the float. We're going to try to take it out without damaging that. We're going to change just the pump itself, not the assembly. So we're going to try to get our hands on a good fuel pump for about $60, $70. And we're going to change that next. We'll film that operation when we get to that point. But it looks like our engine's starting to idle down. Got good throttle response. Into a red line right there. Toyota is a very stout vehicle. At least this V6 is. I know a lot of GMs that wouldn't handle that. Not with high mileage like this one has on it. 242,000 miles. Alright. We're going to rock it like it's 1994 in this Camry. Because this Camry is a 94. up there quick.
No hesitation.
No. No hesitation. Front tires need to be balanced a little bit. We need to change the struts in the front. Other than that, we're good.
Usually this is when the check engine light would pop on too. Whenever the
Yeah, about 5 minutes into it or so, after getting on it. Looks pretty good to me. Let's try hitting the ECT button. Nice good downshift. Nice upshift. Yeah, she's getting up. Alright, so we're back. We're idling a little bit below 900.
It should mean we're up to operating temperature.
Oh, I forgot to mention, there's not a Toyota brand temperature sending unit in here. There is a shitty AutoZone brand temperature sending unit in here. Valuecraft or some crap.
Yeah.
I bought it for $17 at the last minute because mine was faulty. But one is coming in the mail, UPS, tomorrow actually. And that'll be Toyota brand, so it should probably have the proper values that it's supposed to read between. I found that with messing with Toyota, it likes to have all its values within a certain range, so you can't just use a generic temperature sensor sending unit like that, or any electrical part. I would not use some off brand. I would stick with Denso or something genuine Toyota. I know it's expensive, but hey, you know, if you like your car, obviously we're cruising in a 1994. They actually hold their value. I mean, they hold up. So far so good. No check engine light by now, sitting in a driveway after a run like that. And also we took the interstate back and hit about, 95, something like that. We would have had a check engine light by now, and we do not. So we'll give it another shot tomorrow, and we'll see when the heat changes outside and everything. And we'll put a comment or something.